Working 18-hour days, I slipped and I fell. Winter's up and hit me, I had to change well. There's no way to sustain it, you'll crash and burn. Will not be able to work and no way to earn. Change well, and then you can leave. Change well, and your kids you can feed. Turn your life around for the final bell. It's now or never, you have to change well. It's now or never, you must change well. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Change Well podcast. Now, usually on these podcasts, I talk about tips and tricks to help you become well. But today I'm going to do something different. We're going to talk about what to do if a friend or a loved one has an addiction or other unhealthy habits and you want to help them. In a lot of cases, it's going to be what not to do. Now, to begin the podcast, I'm going to start with something out of the ordinary. I'm going to start with a quote from all things, Amazon Prime miniseries. And it's also a book. It's from Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And here's the quote. You can't control another person. It does not matter how much you love them. You can't love someone back to health, and you can't hate someone back to health. And no matter how right you are about something, it doesn't mean they will change their mind. Now, anyone who has ever dealt with an addiction and unhealthy habits of a loved one understands the truth behind the above quote. I know my own experience on both sides of this relationship. I have tried unsuccessfully to dissuade loved ones from unhealthy habits. On the flip side, and the one I'll talk to, is my wife and children had tried to stop me from overworking and overeating. I do not want to prevent you from trying to help your family and friends. That is not the point of this podcast. But the truth is that they will never tackle the negative routine until they realize that they have a problem, that they have to change, that they have to take concrete steps to change. They may change for a season, but sooner or later, if it's not initiated by them and reaches into their very soul, they will fall into their old routines. Now, as I said, I will not talk about others, but I know it was the case with my addiction to unhealthy eating and overworking. Despite my grumpiness and excess weight, I still marvel at how my family and my kids dealt with me. Now, here's one of the things and one thing they had to deal with. My wife and kids often tried to convince me not to make them go on an ICR. Now, what is an ICR? It's an ice cream run. I would give them money and say, hey, go to Dairy Queen, get me 2 medium M&M Blizzards, and then you all can have one. And even though they wanted a Blizzard of their very, very own, they would say, Dad, do you really need the ICR? And I said, oh, I just came back from work. I want ice cream. Can you go get it? And then they would do it, right? I mean, also they're kids and they want ice cream too, but they tried their best. They also had to deal with me not keeping up with them or even hindering an event. Now, one thing I'm not proud of, and it's still etched in my brain, two episodes of this. Both of my youngest children, my son and my youngest daughter were in the homecoming court. And I was over 300 pounds. In the homecoming court. Now, they wanted their dad there, but one thing is really, really seared into my mind. I came back from work. I barely made it to time for halftime. And I was in my suit and everything, and I rushed onto the field to get prepped to walk on the field on the sidelines. And all of a sudden, from being dehydrated, stressed out, and overeating, my legs cramped so bad and I had a Charlie horse. Now, we only had 2 minutes more before we had to get onto the field. And here I am trying my best to stretch out my two calves because I quite frankly could not walk. Finally, by some miracle, my legs stretched out enough that I could hobble onto the field with my son. Testament to the love of my son and my daughter, they wanted me on the field. I don't know if I would have wanted me on the field. And, they loved me enough that they wanted me on this field, but I did nothing at that time to change my ways until I was ready. Even with that embarrassment, I had done nothing, for another year or two. So this sounds kind of distressing. What can you do to help loved ones when they're off the rails? Well, I'm going to tell you 3 things you can never, ever do and 3 things you should do. Here's what not to do. 1, nag or beg. Those in addiction or bad habits may not do what you want when you love them, but they will surely not do it if you nag or beg them to stop their behavior. If you do it you could do it in a loving tone a little bit, but you can't do it. It will instead put them on the defensive or have them looking for problems on your end. Here's one example. The few times my wife asked me if I really needed another glass of wine or beer or Blizzard, I would say something like this. You would not ask me this if I had your fidgety habits. You can eat this and not gain a pound because of your metabolism. That was my answer. So you can't really nag or beg. They have to come to the realization on themselves. The second thing is, so you can't disconnect either. I understand that sometimes a person's addiction threatens to drag you in. So you may need to separate from them a bit, especially during the negative behavior. But if at all possible, stay connected with the person. In that way, you can help them when they are ready. Third, enable them. Even if you do not have a similar temptation, try to avoid activities. My kids and wife always tried to avoid the activities or actions that trigger the unhealthy behavior of your friend. If the person drinks excessively, avoid bars and nightclubs on your outings. If they overeat, avoid the buffet line. Don't take them to a buffet. Find other activities that do not trigger the harmful habits and potentially reinforce positive, and potentially, on the other hand, reinforce positive habits. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do anything with them. You just pick something different that you know is not a trigger until they come to the realization and get better. And sometimes it may be a long time. Now, what should you do? The thing I would recommend, number 1, is to continue to love them. I know I opened up with the idea that you cannot love someone into health. You can't. They have to come to that realization. But you can love them through the tough times and be there when they are ready to make a change. So you can't love them so much that you're going to do it without their own inclination. But you can love them and show them that you are there for them when they come to that realization. Number 2, another thing to do is intervene when necessary. Intervention when required is not the same as nagging. Also, sometimes love calls for tough medicine. If someone is about to harm themselves or others, you need to intervene either directly if possible or with authorities if you or they or others are at risk. When and when not to intervene is often a hard call. It's not a science. I'm not going to say when to do it and when not to do it. It's an art. But sometimes it is the loving thing to do and the only thing to do to let the other person know they need to change and you're not going to accept this behavior. And third, and I think this is really, really key, and it really helped me, quietly lead by example. Don't nag if you can, and do not have a similar bad habit. Live the positive one you want them to take. Make a healthy meal. Ask the workaholic to take a break and walk with you. It may not work the first or the second or even the third time, but if you keep it up, they will notice your quiet example. Bottom line, you can't love someone into health, and you can't hate someone into health. All you can do is be there and help them in their recovery when they come to that realization. And until next time, change well.